Yes, and
Okay, so I would like to call the Monday, September 21st, 2020 meeting to order at 4 p.m. And this is for closed session. So roll call, please.
Mayor Hawkins,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer,
Here.
Councilmember Garaventa,
Here.
Councilmember Such,
Here.
and Councilmember Sagerstrom.
Here.
So everyone is here. Okay, is there any public comment before we go into closed session about any non-agenda items? Or this is on anything that is for closed session. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Mayor. This is Nubia. I'm actually covering the meeting tonight, so I'll be helping out with some hosting duties. And I do not see any hands raised, but for members of the public who do wish to participate in public comment on this agenda item, you can do so by pressing the raise hand button under the participant tab, pressing *9 on your phone, or alternatively, you can also, those are the two ways to participate in closed session agenda items for public comment. At this point, I do not see any hands raised for public comment.
Okay, so we will close the public comment and then adjourn into closed session.
Okay, Mayor, if you will give me just a moment to move everybody over into a breakout session, and just bear with me for 1 second, please.
Excellent.
Nubia, you're going to need to move the council and Sagerstrom, of course, myself, and our HR director, Chris Gorski.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And for members of the public who remain in the general meeting, we will be coming back from closed session at the start of the meeting at 5 o'clock. So for now, if everybody can just mute their cameras and turn off their screens, and we will return at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
5:01, and I would like to call the open session, the regular open session of the Sonora City Council meeting to order for Monday, September 21st, 2020 at 5 p.m. Wanted to announce in closed session, the council voted to reject the claim by Kimberly Jackal. And then on item number 2, direction was provided to staff. Okay, so Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Garaventa.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, roll call, please, Mary Rose.
Mayor Hawkins,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer,
Here.
Councilmember Garaventa,
Here.
Councilmember Sagerstrom,
Here.
and Councilmember Such.
Here.
Excellent. Everyone is here. City clerk's report on agenda posting.
So the agenda was posted on Friday, September 18th at 2 p.m.
Okay, approval of the agenda. I believe there is one that we do have to pull under new business.
Yep, there is an item we will be pulling, Mr. Mayor. That's item number 8, approve a lease agreement between the city of Sonora and the county of Tuolumne to rent first floor of the Education Center located at 326 North Washington Street. The county has asked us to pull that item
And when will we be notified to pull that item?
at 3:30 p.m. this afternoon
By phone call or email?
by email.
Excellent, thank you. Is everything else okay with the agenda? Anything else need to be pulled? Okay. Presentations. Receive a presentation from Waste Management concerning their recent recycling education campaign.
And Nubia, if you could make me the host so that I can do the PowerPoint presentation for Vanessa. Vanessa, are you on the line?
I am here.
Oh, I see her. Hold on just a second. I'm going to share my screen so that, let's see. Did you make me host?
Or did.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you did. I'm sorry. Let me just make sure. Can everybody see that? Oh, hold on. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
sort of.
thank you.
Okay. And this item is from Waste Management. Vanessa Burris she's here with us. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and I will go ahead and scroll through the PowerPoint presentation for you, Vanessa.
Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, thank you, Mayor Hawkins and the rest of City Council for giving us a little bit of time tonight. Mary Rose and I have been working on an education campaign for the residents of Sonora, and we thought it would be good to give you an update on where we're at, and also a little reminder because it's been some time, I think, since this was initially brought to council for approval.
Well, sorry, I'm sorry. Get a little bit of, hold on just a moment. Okay, sorry about that, Vanessa. I was doing the audio.
That's okay. So again, a little bit of background. Back in 2018, the recycling industry was faced with some pretty big challenges in terms of China, our biggest importer of recyclables, putting limits on contamination and then eventually stopping the purchase of all recyclables from the United States. At that time, my predecessor, Joe Catalago, came to City Council and proposed some education and a process that we'd like to use to help reduce the amount of trash that's going in to the recycling containers. A contamination charge was approved by council, but it was contingent and planned that we would actually do an education program before that began. So throughout 2019, we worked with the County Solid Waste Committee, which is a collaboration between the city, the county, and representatives from the industry. And an education plan was worked out and agreed to. And it was actually planned to begin in early 2020, but due to COVID-19, we all know that's delayed many different things. And this was one of them. We held off on it for a little while and actually began in September of this year. So now that we're moving forward, we'll give you an update and let you know how it's going. So some parts of that approved education campaign that was worked out. One thing is the goal is overall to have a clear and consistent recycling program between both the city of Sonora and Tuolumne County. Some education components like residential postcard, newspaper advertisements were also desired. But as well as having the Greater Valley Conservation Corps actually go out to each home within the city and provide cart audits for educating residents on a one-on-one basis based on what's inside of their cart. And we're also doing pre and post content studies. So we're looking at the material that is in the recycling containers at our transfer station very closely to see the impact that this education campaign is making on residential habits. So the updated timeline on this is that in August 2020, we did our baseline study of the materials. We hired the Greater Valley Conservation Corps and we ordered outreach materials. All of the outreach materials that I'll show you in just a moment were approved by both the city and the county so that, again, we can keep it consistent between the two. Phase 2, which we're in the middle of right now, is to actually conduct the outreach. We've sent out mailers, we're doing the cart audits, and we have an advertisements going out as well. Phase 3 will be in November 2020, and I can come back to council and give an update on the overall results of the program. And then that would lead to possibly January 2021, beginning the actual contamination charges and kind of the long-term process of managing the contamination. So this right here is the first postcard that did go out to all residents in the first week of September. We kept it really simple for a clear message to residents. Bottles, cans, paper, cardboard are what we want to see, keeping out plastic bags, food, and liquids out of the recycling containers. That's the first item.
Sorry, Vanessa.
That's okay. One more. There you go. We have had the Conservation Corps go out. They went out the first time on September 5th. And since recycling is collected every other Friday in Sonora, it's going to take us a while to get to all of the homes. But the first day was a big success. We sent them out with, I think, maybe 180 tags. And up at the top, you can see a picture of the first tag. We are leaving tags out when the recycling is clean and just saying thank you for doing a great job. And at the bottom there, you can see one of the pictures is there's a fan inside of the recycling cart. So when we find items like that, next to that is a picture of the front and back of the tag. And we can actually, it has all of the examples of what not to put in there, what to put in there. And the auditor, the corpse member can write down the actual item that was identified that doesn't belong in the recycling container. We feel like this is a really effective way of reaching the residents because we're actually looking at what's in their cart and they can kind of get one-on-one education. And these are just a couple of newspaper advertisements. You might have seen them in the Union Democrat. So every Saturday in September, we have one of these ads in. The first one is about losing the bags. So don't bag your recyclables is the big message. And also keep a lid on it. So don't have your containers overfull. This is a data sheet. We're working on, we've already done the pre-education content study. So this is pretty dense, but you can see over off the side to the bottom, before we started the education, we found that about 35% of the material that we received at the transfer station for recycling was residue or trash that was in the recycling. So we're really hoping that with the education that we're doing, the newspaper ads, the individual cart audits and the postcard, that we can move that number and reduce how much trash is coming in the recycling. So we'll be doing another one towards the end after the Conservation Corps has finished up all of their audits. So just in summary, we have already completed the baseline content study, the introductory postcard. We've done the first week of cart audit, and 3 of the 4 newspaper ads have already happened. You'll see the last one coming this Saturday. The work we still need to do is, like I said, the newspaper ad, still working through all of the cart audits. And our final content study, and then we'll summarize all of the data, all of the results from that, and be able to bring it back to Mary Rose or possibly to council if you're interested in hearing what the final results are.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any council members have any questions? Councilmember Such.
Vanessa, could you possibly, it was hard, we're kind of far away from the screen. Is there any way you could send, you have a copy of the, okay, never mind. I was, I would like to read what was up there, but I couldn't see it. So Mary Rose will give me a copy.
Vanessa, I'll make sure I share a copy of the PowerPoint with all council members.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
No, just to point out, on the counties, or on the County Solid Waste Committee, represented for the city, and 35% number for residue is kind of a common number the last couple of years. And it's, it inhibits the ability of us to do a decent job of recycling and getting revenue and revenue for that. So as an example, China tended to would take our recyclables up until a couple of years ago, and was willing to take a lot of so-called residue in that, and they've changed their rate for how much residue can be there to about 0.5%. So it gives you an idea of the vast difference between what we need to do to try to get what's called residue and for waste management and everybody out of our system, so we can actually have a decent, successful recycling program. So.
No other questions? Did Ann have a question? I don't want to forget about Ann.
No, I have no questions. Thank you. I had a conversation with Vanessa, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. So we didn't talk about the 35% residue, but I did get my reminder on my waste management. So thank you.
Okay. So then on presentations, I don't think I've done a presentation like this. Can we ask for public comment on these type of presentations? Okay. Excellent. So is there any public comment about the presentation?
Members of the public wishing to participate on the item, you can do so by pressing the raise hand button under the participant tab. If you are calling in by phone, you can press *9 to get you in line for public comment. So at this time, if there's any member of the public wishing to make a public statement, please do so. I do not see any hands raised right now. So just as a reminder for members of the public, we're trying to keep everybody's account muted during the presentation of the agenda and the items until such time as we open up for public comment, and once we go one by one. At this time, I do not see any hands raised for public comment, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you to Waste Management. And then we'll go to our next presentation, which is receive a presentation of the draft.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you,
Yes,
Vanessa.
thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Receive a presentation of the draft State Route 49 multi-modal complete streets and congested corridor plan. Say that 5 times.
Matt, is your mic on? We're having a hard time hearing you.
It is now. Can you hear me now? One of my favorite commercials.
Control, or yeah, they're just going to give it straight to Charles in the
Sorry.
Okay.
presentation with it. Well, they are.
So at this time, Rochelle, I'm going to have Rochelle introduce the item for us that will be presented by TCTC. Rochelle, do we need to give, is there be a presentation that we need to allow Tyler or Darren or anybody?
Yeah, it's my understanding from Tyler that we're going to have 2 separate presentations. One from Charles Carroll and the other one is from Derek Kirkland. As we move forward here, I think they need 2 separate presentations. One, Charles is with Caltrans and Derek is with Wood Rogers. so that they can present their portions of the plan. I know that we also have Tyler Somerset and Darren Grossi from the Tuolumne County Transportation Council with us tonight. I'm sure they're probably going to give us a little background on it before they turn it over, but I will leave that with them. We have two separate basically presentations. One is for the multi-modal complete streets plan that the TCTC is working on, and the other is the congested corridor plan. And this area covers 6 miles from Jamestown to Columbia College. So I'm going to give it to Tyler or Darren, and then they can go from there.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? This is Darren Grossi, Executive Director of the TCTC, and I'm seeing heads nod. Okay, great. Well, good evening, Mayor Hawkins and City Council. Thank you for having this item on your agenda. I think you'll agree that it's very important that we make improvements to Highway 49. They're consistent with the City Council and of course the public's desires. In that vein, we did seek and get a grant through Caltrans to do the complete streets plan for Highway 49. We've been working at that for really more than a year now. And then somewhere along the way, Caltrans, after SB1, recognized the need to do congested corridor project plans in rural areas. Congested corridor funding is a major funding source that the state, through the California Transportation Commission, controls as a result of SB1. It's got significant amounts of funding in it. So we've been working on this plan with Rochelle and a project team, including county folks and Caltrans folks for a while. These plans are important because they're going to guide funding for the next decade or so, from big programs like the SHOP program of Caltrans, the State Transportation Improvement Program, Caltrans Maintenance, Active Transportation Plan programs, congestion mitigation or quality funds. And then, like I said, it makes us eligible for the SB1 congested corridor funding, as well as the state and local partnership program. From these planning documents, you're going to see projects moving forward, much like what we did in East Sonora Bypass, where over a decade or so, we invested over $130 million to relieve congestion in the East Sonora area. We're giving that kind of level of focus to Highway 49 from Jamestown through Sonora up towards Columbia. We've already initiated a couple projects that are consistent with this plan. We've completed the project study report for a 5-lane widening complete streets project in Jamestown. We'll be working with Caltrans to look at how we fund the environmental document. That'll probably be about a $20 million project. And then we've also initiated applications for funding on the active transportation program. As you know, we've got the walkway project going from Stockton Road up through Dragon Gulch. It's Dragon Gulch Connector Plan. So this planning document will lead to projects. It's important that we hear from the City Council. We know that we got our planning right. We've got a lot of information for you tonight. I think we're going to start with Charles Carroll of Caltrans. We've asked him to kind of focus on, as well as Derek from Wood Rogers, focus on really the aspects of the overall corridor that are germane to the city of Sonora mostly, but they're happy to answer questions about the whole corridor as well. So with that, if we could get Charles to maybe do his presentation, that'd be great.
Maybe if we can allow Charles Carroll to have the hosting so he can share his screen and do the presentation. Oh.
Hello. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I'm trying to share my screen, but I appear to be disabled.
Have you been made host, Nubia?
Yeah, I'm host, and you should be able to. There should be a share screen button in the bottom toolbar.
Okay, I'm pressing that now, and it's not responding to me.
Let me see.
All right.
You want to try again?
Yes.
Maybe a short presentation.
Yeah, it's still not wanting to share it.
As a backup, maybe I can bring it up and try and share it from my screen just as an alternative.
Yeah, we can try that.
You both should have rights for sharing screen, so I'm not quite sure what happened.
There it is.
Yeah, the new condensed one. I don't seem to get on the share screen.
Oh, well, I haven't shared it yet. Let's see here. All right, now I need to get back to where it is. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it does say host disabled participant screen sharing on our end as well.
Okay, well then that is a problem I think it was probably at the time that the meeting was created, and I'm not sure if I can make that change now. So alternatively, Mary Rose, we could take just a couple minute break and see if you can send your PowerPoint presentation to Mary Rose and she can host. Alternatively, I can make you host, but I prefer not to, because then that would require you to switch it back to me in order to continue the meeting. So I don't.
Sure. Mary Rose, I'm going to send that to you right now.
I don't have access to my email right now.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
So if you take a
About-
read, you can try to.
so let's take 5 minutes and then come back.
So we can take 5 minutes. Mary Rose, if you want to speak with Darren or Charles offline, they can send it to me alternatively, and I can share it on my screen. So, but yeah, if we don't mind, thank you, Mayor, for the 5 minute break.
Yeah, let's go and take a 5 minute break and then we'll come back.
Okay. Can you hear us, Mr.? I think you're ready to go, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, are we unfrozen again?
You're unfrozen.
Yay. Okay, so we apologize for the delay. We were having technical difficulties and we are now back. So Nubia, I believe that you have everything for the presentation, correct?
I do. So I will defer to, I think Charles was going to present on the item. So if he wants to get started, and I will pull it up right now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present. Let me see if I can. Okay. So I'm Charles Carroll, and I'm an associate transportation.
Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I just see now that I sent the corridor study and not your presentation, so I was just kicking myself there real quick.
Okay.
Is this not the right one?
Yeah, there's a PowerPoint
Hold on.
that I'm going to use.
Well, why don't you get started, and then I'll try and catch up with you if I can. So I'm going to.
Okay.
And Tyler, just for the public's sake, is this presentation, is this what was attached to the agenda item for the public to follow along?
I think Tyler's away from the.
Yeah.
Hello, Tyler. Yeah. Boy.
Darren. Because we do have a PowerPoint presentation that was attached, Charles, to our agenda. That was the 49 corridor project. And all of our
Yes.
council members have it in front of them.
And that is the correct one, the one
Okay.
that's included in the agenda.
For the sake of time, Mr. Mayor, I say we just go through what was attached to the agenda and get the presentation.
That's exactly what I think we should do. Because we definitely have other things on the agenda.
It's the one that's July 20th, 2020.
No.
No.
This is in our agenda packet.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it on my screen. It just says July 20th on the lower left corner, but it has the Caltrans Sonora and Jamestown State Route 10849 corridor study, right?
Yes, but I
No.
have a date of September 20th, September 2020.
Did you send them the correct Wood Rogers
So
one?
should we have Charles just get going with the presentation?
Check that. one.
Yes.
All right. Let's see here. So so I work with the Office of System Planning and Goods Movement, District 10, Caltrans, and we put together a corridor study to study existing highway conditions on SR 10849 and in the Jamestown and Sonora area. Okay, so I'm just going to go through what I have on my screen, and it's pretty much going to be the same as the PowerPoint that's in the agenda. So you may not be able to see the PowerPoint, but that's pretty much what I'm going to go off of. So just bear with me here. We'll give it a whirl. So on slide 2, it'll say that the purpose of this is to evaluate strategies that address corridor congestion and that enhance active transportation. There are several steps involved. The needs had to do with reducing congestion, enhancing safety, and enhancing active transportation. And the scope was pretty much from Chicken Ranch Road to Parrots Ferry. Now, there are several steps here. There are about 6 to 7 steps, and where we are right now is pretty much in the public comment period, the review period for this plan, and after that, we intend to publish the plan. As I mentioned earlier, the scope pretty much goes from Chicken Ranch all the way up to Parrots Ferry. And the map in the PowerPoint indicates that.
It's the second study. Second.
That's slide 3 of 28 in the PowerPoint.
Charles, I'm actually,
Yes.
I pulled up the PDF. I'm going to share my screen now.
All right.
See if we can, okay. If this is it, then we'll go down.
Okay.
It's the second study in our packet, Nubia. And looks like it starts at about page 32, correct, Charles? I want to make sure that we get to the right, because there's 2
Presentation.
presentations.
This is for the multi-modal corridor plan. This is a separate study. And yeah, so
That's the Wood Rogers up.
that's the Wood Rogers study that we're looking at right now.
So it's not,
That's fine. It's the first one.
Come on, keep going.
Should we pull the plug on this?
so
first
is
one?
it this, am I looking at the right document or not?
No, this is a different document.
I'll find it. You keep going and I'll find it.
All right.
It's page 32.
Got a lot of flexibility.
So where I'm at right now is on slide 4 of 28, which shows a map that basically says that a lot of the strategies that were featured in the 2016 RTP. Oh, there we go. Yep,
There it is.
Right there.
there we are. This is it. So let's go to slide 4, and we'll pick up from there. There we are. That's it. So this map basically just says that a lot of the items that were in the 2016 RTP in terms of proposed projects are also items that we looked at in this corridor study. And this map basically shows that at least in part or in whole, a lot of the strategies talked about in the RTP are also brought up in this study. So going to slide 5. So this indicates the goals and the strategies we tested. So anything with a green yes indicates that a goal was met. And the items also listed on the left side indicate the types of the goals and the objectives and the strategies we tested. We tested several strategies, and this indicates that to what extent those strategies met a goal outlined in the plan. And next. So this indicates active transportation related strategies. We also looked at that in this study. And overall, the active transportation pathway, which is something that would roughly be parallel or adjacent to SR 10849, that overall did pretty well in our study. Improvements to curb, corners, ADA enhancements, and sidewalk gap fill. And we also looked at paved shoulder widths in this study. Next. So the results, overall, the 5-lane widening scenario did very well. This scenario would also include multimodal enhancements. Active transportation pathway did pretty well in the 2040 model conditions. The Rawhide realignment also performed well in both existing and 2040 conditions. All strategies, we had a scenario for that. That also did pretty well. The Greenlee extension did well in terms of reducing volume through downtown Sonora. And we also took a look at a couple of Western bypass options. Next. So those Western bypass options indicated little change in terms of reducing traffic through downtown Sonora, and they're basically they're tier-through projects. But one of the reasons we looked at that was because we wanted to take a look at improvements to terminal access facilities or truck facilities on the highway. This map shows the part of the state highway that is not terminal access north of Ponderosa Drive. And the images on the right show what it would take if there was, say, a hypothetical attempt to make the highway through downtown Sonora STAA compliant. As you can tell, it would be quite infeasible. Next. This shows the map on the left, speed limits, posted speed limits, and the map on the right shows timed point locations we used in a tachometer run. The purpose of a tachometer run was just to basically see how slow actual traffic was going in comparison to the posted speed limits on the left. Next. And this is the result that we got out of the tachometer run. And what you can see here are basically two locations where on here in Jamestown, actual speeds were substantially lower than the posted speed limit, and actual speeds in downtown Sonora were also substantially lower than the posted speed limit. And so this is information that we would use to say, yes, we have delay, we have congestion in the state highway here. Next. So we collected data using cameras. MyoVision cameras were used to collect information on vehicle types as well as pedestrians and bicycles. The map on the left shows where we put the cameras in the corridor in the state highway. And an image on the right indicates the kind of data that we got out of this. So we got information about turning movements at intersections, as well as vehicle type, as well as pedestrian and bicycle activity. So you can see that there are pedestrians here at the corners here. We did capture that, the example here being Rawhide. Next. So let's take a look at the strategies that we looked at in this study. So what we had here, this is a Rawhide Bridge and the intersection realignment strategy. Overall, this did very well in both the 2018 and 2040 model conditions. It reduced delay, reduced congestion, So overall, this did pretty well in terms of operations. Next. And this is the Greenlee extension strategy. You can see where it is generally here on the map. And this is like a turning movements diagram that we put together based on data from project initiation and forecasting here at District 10, basically showing the turning movements where the Greenlee extension would go if it were completed north of downtown Sonora. Next. And this we looked at was one of the things we looked at was a roundabout project here down at Mackey Ranch. In our simulations, it didn't do very well operationally. However, the Chicken Ranch Rancheria of Miwok Indians did indicate that in their own studies, it did perform better in terms of operations. And that is something that we will be including in our final report. Next. This is also the Columbia Way roundabout proposal near Sonora High School. This did come from Vision Sonora, and so we took a look at this. And although it didn't do very well in our simulations in terms of operations, it can have merit as a safety enhancement, especially if it's paired with a Greenlee extension that would reroute some traffic out of downtown Sonora. So it may reduce some of the volume, and it can be a benefit. It can be a safety enhancement to pedestrians and bicyclists. Next. And this is the 5-lane widening strategy. This is an example here in Jamestown. We got Rawhide intersection here. We got the 5th Avenue intersection over here. And this strategy did very well in both 2018 and 2040 conditions. Very well in terms of operations, reducing delay, reducing congestion. Next one, please. This is the signal adjustments strategy. This can be a rather short-term enhancement, and we looked at this is an example from the 2040 conditions, and we looked at just the enhancement of the signals themselves in terms of optimization, and then we factored in the bridge and intersection realignment, and then we also factored in the lane widening. And so when you throw in the bridge realignment and the intersection realignment and the lane widening strategy, that did show the most improvement in terms of an LOSF to an LOSD in 2040 conditions. Next, please. This is the existing conditions without the Greenlee extension. So you can see here's downtown Sonora. We have this comes from a Transcad from TDM data. About 18,900, about 19,000 volume going through downtown Sonora. And next, please. And this shows what goes on with the Greenlee extension. So the image on the right shows with the Greenlee, and you can see it's kind of hard to see here, but there is a reduction down to about 16,432 in 2040 conditions. The map on the left shows one of the two hypothetical Western bypass scenarios. So again, these are tier 3 listed in the RTP, the locations of which have not been determined. But just we wanted to see how that would affect things, and the results were minimal, as the chart below indicates. Next, please. So we also looked at some active transportation strategies. Next, please. So we looked at things like crosswalks, and the map on the left shows the orange indicates existing crosswalks and the green indicates where we think crosswalks should go in the future. So Jamestown locations, more crosswalks in that area, as well as crosswalks near the fairgrounds and all the way up to north of downtown Sonora, up to Preston Place. So these are some proposals. The images on the right come from Vision Sonora. That's pretty much near the fairgrounds. Next, please. This indicates sidewalk strategies. So more or less, it's the same thing. The purple and the green illustrate the basic idea that these are locations where we think sidewalks would be an enhancement, a gap fill in terms of providing a facility for active transportation users. Next, please. And these are indications of ADA improvements at curb corners. Okay, so curb corners that meet ADA guidelines. So the blue dots indicate where needed improvements would go, both in Sonora and in Jamestown. The red dots indicate where no paved pedestrians exist. Next, please. Active transportation pathway. The map on the right indicates that it would go from Chicken Ranch Road all the way up to Parrott's Ferry. There would be an opportunity to go on a local route here near Dragoon Gulch. And this would be something that both pedestrians and cyclists would use. And we find that based on the information that we collected from active transportation counts from the cameras, every single place we put a camera caught also counted pedestrian and bicyclists. Every single location we put a camera. So we know there's an existing need out there to accommodate active transportation users. And also from CTPP data, we also found that there is a percentage of commuters who are cycling and who are walking as part of their work. So we know that there is a need out there based on the data that we have. Next, please. This is an illustration of paved shoulder widening strategies. The thick blue line shows locations where we would hope to have at least an 8-foot paved shoulder with edge line striping on both sides of the highway. This would be an enhancement to cyclists. And so this is something we also looked at and advocated for in the corridor study. Next, please. And this basically shows the timeline, or the based on what we have from the RTP, from the 2016 RTP. We have short-term, midterm, and long-term and hypothetical timelines for all the strategies that we looked at in this corridor study. And I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Does any of the council have any questions? Okay, so we'll see if any member of the public has any questions.
If there's any member of the public wishing to provide public comment on this presentation, you can do so by raising your hand. You can press the raise hand button under the participant tab, or pressing *9 on your phone in order to participate. So I think Jerry raised his hand. Jerry disappeared. Are you unmuted? I saw Jerry's hand raised, but the council member did have a comment or a question.
Let's see, make sure I'm unmuted. Yeah, this is Hans Hagerstrom. I was a little confused. So that you had 2018 and a projection to what, 2040? So 2 decades. Is that what you're looking at in terms of a timeline?
That was what we used for our modeling. So when we put this in our modeling, when we put this in our simulation, we wanted to look at what things are like now, roughly existing. So we were using 2018 data, and we also wanted to examine how things might change into 2040. And that came from the traffic demand model. It came from other data that we used to help give us a sense, some degree of predicting how things might change and how these proposed strategies would affect things that exist now and how they might affect things in 2040. And so that's really why we talked about
long-term thinking.
That's right. That's right. That's part of the planning process, and we wanted to make sure that we examine that in this study.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anyone else? I have a question then.
Jerry has his hand raised. Jerry, I'm trying to unmute you. You should be unmuted.
He's still muted, Nubia.
There you go, Jerry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, Jerry.
Hear you.
Okay, I was trying to get it on the video too, but I've read, reviewed this report as well as the other report here. The Caltrans report, I think, is the most comprehensive thing I've read from Caltrans, and I've been a civil engineer for 48 years here, and it's a very good study. It doesn't come to any conclusions as yet, and I think they want a lot of input. And my input, I think, is in looking at it's a study that really looks at evaluating the effectiveness of all these strategies. And the end product here is you will see that the Greenlee Road extension is the most effective way of reducing your congestion in the downtown. I think you're really kidding yourself if you're thinking that doing all these bike lanes and trails through the downtown is going to appreciably change the traffic congestion in town. I mean, how many bicycles do you really see in this town? The most effective project is Greenlee Road extension. It's a 1.2 mile extension on an adopted route that was in 1987, and that ought to be your main priority in reducing congestion in the downtown area. So that's it.
Thank you, Jerry. Anyone else? Anyone else from the public?
I don't see any more hands raised on this item, Mayor.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to the council for any other questions, and I believe Mayor Pro Tem.
I had one question, Charles, and that was for 2040, what is the projected population of the county?
The projected population, well, according to Department of Finance, that population is likely going to decrease. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but it's, I would say, yeah, it's based on that information, it's likely not to grow or to increase, but rather for a slight decrease. So that is in the report.
Mr. Mayor, if I could jump in, and Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did use our traffic model for this study, is that correct?
That's right. We did. We used TDM. We used the existing and the 2040 TDM.
Yeah, and our model uses a locally adopted growth projection, which is also consistent with the county general plan of 63,000 population.
In 2040.
In 2040, that's correct. So it's a modest growth rate.
A slight growth.
And I know that, and it's again with generational studies and that sort of thing, I know that the longevity of the baby boomer population has really thrown everything off because people are living longer now, and you know we've got a baby boomer population that's either retired or in the midst of retiring or looking into retirement in the next few years, and this seems to be a destination for retirees. So it's kind of thrown every matrix. And I know this from reading, but I know that it's thrown every matrix that they've looked at for population growth kind of on its side. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's an interesting world in the world of population projections. I've done a lot of reviews of the Department of Finance efforts. And the one thing I found in looking back, for instance, in Tuolumne County, when I started here in the early 90s, they were projecting we'd be at 96,000 population by 2015. And over the years, I've watched those populations change radically. And as best I can determine, short-term changes in actual census population have major effects on their longer-term projections. So, and oftentimes, in my opinion, they're wildly inaccurate in the long term. You can miss it by the population by 20 or 30,000 in LA, and nobody's going to know the difference. But in Tuolumne County, you miss by 20 or 30,000, and you've got a huge problem in terms of infrastructure planning. So that's why we've deferred to local population projections through the blueprint effort. We were able to look at actual building permits and planned improvements and whatnot. And then you've got things like COVID, which is changing patterns in terms of where people want to live, that I think will push more population towards rural areas in Tuolumne County is what we're hearing. So we do our best, but you know, we're not exactly aligned with the Department of Finance estimates at this point.
Anyone else? Well, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may also just in response to kind of Jerry's comments, I just want to point out that our funding comes in a variety of pots of funds. And some of those funds have some flexibility. Others are directed directly at transit or directly at bike and ped improvements. While there's no getting away from the fact that Greenlee Road extension is the best bang for the buck for automobiles, we do have other funding out there that we need to think about what improvements we can do with those funds. So I think that's an important distinction to make. And finally, I want to mention Derek Kirkland is still on the line and ready to give his presentation on the complete streets aspects of Highway 49.
There's another presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Excellent. So let's move on to that one unless any other council members have questions.
And Nubia, that was the first part of the agenda packet, agenda item for item number 4.
Okay. I will ask the presenter to see if they can try to share their screen, because I think we tried to work this behind the scenes to see if it works. If it doesn't, then I can pull up the PDF.
It says disabled.
Okay, it's not working. So I will, and I'm assuming this is the SR 49 multimodal corridor plan presentation that I. Okay, 1 second.
And I thank the public for their patience. This is all part of transparency. So we want to make sure as part of the gear and the local, I don't know what you'd call it, but the local machine, that everything is transparent, and this is part of that.
Is this it?
Yep, that's it. Good evening, I should say, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm Derek Kirkland with Wood Rogers. We were the consultant hired by the TCTC to help with the multimodal corridor elements, and so we did work with Caltrans quite a bit through this process, and our report was mainly focused more on how to incorporate multimodal into some of the highway projects, and we also focused on getting a class 1 or shared use path, basically connecting Jamestown through Sonora up to the Columbia College. If you go to the next slide, please. Keep going. Keep going. So again, just to kind of reiterate, so the study goals were basically, geared to around the SB1, the congested corridor stuff. But what we really wanted to do was look beyond the automobile in terms of congestion and look at ways that we can increase mobility for travelers, but also provide some increased transportation choice. And as well as kind of connecting the distinctive communities as part of the RTP with more multimodal opportunities, which also helps to improve the air quality. Next. So as I mentioned, the study area basically Jamestown up through city of Sonora, and then to Paris Ferry Road, and then up to Columbia College. Next. Some of the things that we looked at when we started the study was just, what multimodal opportunities are out there today. We looked at connectivity between the communities. We looked at connectivity within the communities. And one of the big things we saw was really between Jamestown, City of Sonora, and Columbia College. There just really wasn't much in terms of multimodal connectivity. I'm sure you guys have seen it. A lot of people walking on just makeshift trails and just doing whatever they can, sometimes walking into the highway. We also looked at areas within the cities or in the towns and just found that, there's a lot of gaps in the network, a lot of ADA challenges, a lot of safety concerns with intersection crossings, and really just not a whole lot of bicycle facilities in this corridor at all. Next slide, please. So one of the things we wanted to do is just look at the distinctive communities and how do we connect them? How do we make that connectivity and really try to help the RTP in terms of performance measures and connecting these communities with multimodal opportunities. Next. So we started this project in April of 2018. There are several things that kind of impacted the schedule. Over the past couple of years, we've been working on this. One of the first ones was the CTC congested corridor guidelines continually changed for a while. So we had to deal with that. There was at points where we were coordinating with Caltrans and, they're a little bit further ahead and we'd get a little further ahead. And so just making sure we had alignment there. And then we looked at some different alternatives with the study. And now the point that we're at is basically we've got the draft report. And this is kind of our last effort for the public outreach, and we'll be wrapping up the plan in the next few weeks. Next slide. Similar to Caltrans, we worked with a lot of stakeholders. We met with private property owners where the shared use path would be proposed. We talked to just a lot of different people, a lot of workshops, the high school, the college. We worked with city staff. So we spent a lot of time just getting into the nuts and bolts of the plan with the different stakeholders and just trying to make sure we understood what everyone's ideas and thoughts and kind of where this plan was headed. Next. Keep going. So as I mentioned, one of the biggest things we looked at was just the bike and ped connectivity between the towns and really trying to find ways to get a class 1 facility to work. Mainly the reason for that is a multi-use path or shared use path, a class 1 trail, really gives you a lot of bang for your buck in terms of, especially between the towns, is you could invest in basically building that infrastructure opposed to building multiple types of infrastructure for bikes and peds. And so it really, especially with the topographic constraints and some of the constraints you see in the corridor, it gives us an opportunity to provide a facility that has benefits for both bikes and peds. And so we looked at class 1 facilities as our primary option in the corridor. We also looked at connecting facilities where it wasn't feasible. Class 2 facilities being bike trail or bike lanes, and then class 3 facilities is more of a bike route. We looked at connecting pedestrian areas within the towns. We looked at transit and park and ride lots. We looked at technology opportunities. And then we looked at just how to incorporate a lot of these complete streets into some of the widening projects and some of the highway projects going on. Next. Again, the class 1 facilities are a higher investment, but they basically give you the biggest safety benefits. It's usually they're more highly used because a lot of times you get the families and a lot of people that their comfort level is a lot better with the class 1 facility versus a class 2 or a class 3. Next. And so we looked at a variety of alternatives for the shared use path. The first alternative A was basically utilizing existing transportation corridor right-of-way as much as we could, keeping it along the highways. Mainly, this is the most direct route. It's already kind of a transportation corridor. It's where people want to be. And so we looked at a variety of sections through there. We also looked at an alternative B that basically was along Woods Creek. Some of the issues we ran into with that one were just it gets off the beaten path a little bit. It creates kind of a new transportation corridor, if you will. So you run into a lot of environmental and cost issues with that. We also looked at an alternative C, which was a rails with trails. And although this does have merit as a project, it would be more of a recreation type project than moving people between the towns. But definitely could be an option in the future. Next. Again, in the northern portion of the corridor, kind of same thing. Alternative A followed the existing corridor, transportation corridors, and then option B took took a route through kind of creating a new corridor. And same thing here, just A tends to be kind of the more preferred route just in terms of constructability and cost and not creating as many environmental issues. Next. And so we looked at, and this is kind of gives you an idea of what I just kind of explained is how we measured, how we compared the different alternatives. We looked at user experience, connectivity, environmental impacts, constructability, and planning level cost. And as you can see, although there are some challenges in certain areas of alternative A, for the most part, they were far better than some of the stuff that we looked at with alternative B. And so that's why alternative A became the recommended preferred alternative. Next. And so so basically on these maps, the bike, especially where the bike is, where it's green, is basically that class 1 shared use path. So it follows along 49 for most of the way through Dragon Gulch Trail. There is a section that we do deviate from the highways just to get through the city of Sonora. Putting a shared use path directly through the city would probably not be feasible. So to connect back to the shared use path through that section, we do have, and we recognize there's a lot of projects through the Vision Sonora plan. And so connecting kind of the Vision of Sonora plan with class 2, so bike lanes that would provide connectivity back into the city itself. And then looking at areas where we could have bike routes that would connect as well. In terms of the pedestrian connectivity, a lot of areas, especially like where it's orange here, you can see those would be kind of shared facilities where you would have just a shared use path. And the idea there is really you don't end up building sidewalks and bike lanes. You really are limited to just the shared use path that provides kind of both facilities there. Next. In terms of transit, we looked at making sure we had kind of the park and ride lots. I mean, there is the adventure trolley that seems like it's had some success. And so looking at, how do we capitalize on that? Maybe look at expanding their route times, and then also adding park and ride lots, one up by Parrots Ferry Road and one in Jamestown, where people could really get to those park and ride lots and take an opportunity to get on the adventure trolley and try to keep, especially some of the tourist traffic kind of out of the downtown area. Next. In terms of technology, so we looked at a couple different things with technology, one being related to the park and ride lots and letting people know where they can park and when parking's full. Trying to get them to, especially during events, times when the parking in Sonora fills up, is how do we get them to park outside of the town before they get there and take transit in. So there's some things there, and just messaging for the public to let them know what their opportunities are before they get there. ITS improvements would typically be necessary for those types of things. And then just looking at planning for the future, and especially a big one here is electric bicycles and scooters, especially with the class 1 facilities. Having that shared use path between Jamestown, Sonora, and the Columbia College, and the new trend of the electric bicycles really makes that a more viable route for people moving forward. Next. So these just kind of give you an idea of how we've incorporated some of the complete streets. So you can see on some of the more narrow sections, like up by Parrots Ferry Road, is incorporating that shared use path. It's a pretty narrow section, so it allows us to still get those multimodal improvements in there without having to make big expansions on right-of-way. And then as Caltrans is coming through 49 and 108, is just accommodating those, making sure we can accommodate the shared use path and some of the things within those sections. And as I mentioned, as we get into some of the more narrow, challenging sections, is eliminating sidewalks and just going with the shared use path to make sure that we can still accommodate those multimodal improvements. Next. So similar to Caltrans, we broke these into kind of short-term, medium-term, and long-term sections. And so we have in the plan, you'll see a whole implementation plan that'll talk all about this, about these improvements and teeing them up and getting them ready for funding and then moving into construction. And so these, the idea here is that eventually the RTP is going to get updated based on both of these plans. And a lot of the stuff will get incorporated into that. Next. Keep going. So as I mentioned, we kind of talked about this a little bit. So we're getting ready to finalize the document. And we've already been working with both TCTC and City of Sonora in terms of putting in ATP apps for that first priority project for the shared use path at the basically connecting the fairgrounds to the Dragon Gulch Trail, and then ultimately on to the high school. Next. And so as I mentioned, looking at funding opportunities, especially with the priority segment with the ATP, and just looking at ways that, especially with the adding multimodal to some of these widening projects, it just opens the door for more funding sources. The new congested corridor program really focuses on that, building the highway and the multimodal programs together. But just making sure we can look at these improvements from a corridor perspective, looking at all modes, and just making sure that we're leveraging as much funding as we possibly can. Next. With that, I'll be happy to turn it over to Tyler, and I'm sure Tyler and Darren have some stuff to add. But with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have on the plan. Thank you.
Any of the members of the council have any questions? Councilmember Such.
Just on the very last page, 29, and just also in all of the conversation, this project ends at Columbia College. Why does it not go to the town of Columbia? I'm just curious.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Such. This project was originally identified as a priority to get to the college. That was what we had been hearing from the community through various public hearings on the regional transportation plan. So that was really what we focused on. But that said, that doesn't mean we haven't done planning for the Columbia community itself. Our active transportation plan did look at and propose improvements on Parrots Ferry Road all the way into Sonora Elementary and then the Columbia State Park, as well as other connecting improvements in the community. And they've done that for all the communities, Jamestown, Tuolumne, Twain Harte. They all have individual circulation plans that are part of the active transportation plan, but it's a separate document from this effort.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else having questions before I turn it over to the public? Okay, looking for any public comment. Anyone has any comment about this or questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Any member of the public wishing to provide public comment on this item can do so by pressing the raise hand button under the participant tab or by pressing *9 on your phone. And at this time, Mayor, I do not see any hands raised for this item.
Okay, excellent. I'll bring it back to the council for anything else, and then any other questions?
I would just like to comment that having a little more access to safe biking really would be lovely for a lot of people. And I think that safety is certainly the biggest reason why I've never been a fan of biking locally. So I imagine I'm not alone in that.
As someone who has 5 children and has been hit by a car, I see a lot of good that could come out of this.
You bet.
So if we have, since we have no public comment, no other, and just making sure, Ann, do you have any questions or comments about this?
No, thanks. I I'm looking forward to the actualization of many of these segments and added connectivity between our towns. So, but thank you for the presentations.
So thank you. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mayor. We really appreciate your time tonight and look forward to working with implementing some of these projects down the road.
Yeah, it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right on.
absolutely. Thank you. Okay. So on to public comment for non-agenda items. The public may address the council on any item of public interest not otherwise on the agenda that is within the jurisdiction of the city. No action may be taken. Matters to be addressed may be referred to city staff or placed on subsequent meeting agenda. Speakers are limited to a 5-minute presentation. Is there anyone that would like to speak on any non-agenda item?
Okay, for members of the public, again, a quick reminder, pressing the raise hand button under the participant tab or *9 on your phone. And we do have one member of the public. I believe it's one of the local business owners. I will unmute Casey Bulldog right now for public comment. And you're unmuted. Please proceed.
Well, thank you, Mayor Hawkins and Council. I am wondering about manufacturing. Should I bring that up during the cannabis talk, or should I do that now?
No, bring that up later on in the agenda. We will be addressing that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Is there anyone else?
I do not see any members of the public for non-agendized items, Mayor.
Okay, so we will move on to consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered routine and will be voted on in one motion unless a council member or member of the public has a question or wishes to discuss the item. In that case, the item will be removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. There's only one item on the consent calendar, and that's approval of disbursements in the amount of $160,002.93 for payroll, inclusive employee salaries, employer and employee taxes and retirement contributions, miscellaneous voluntarily employee deductions, respective pay, holiday pay, and equity adjustments. Anyone like to ask any questions? Councilmember Such.
Is this, it seems higher than it usually is. What is the?
Fire overtime and PSPS emergency fund.
Is there any way that could be included in this report? Like if there is, but is a different amount than we are used to seeing, if you could just say why. The other thing that I would like to see is where we are year to date, where the budget is year to date for payroll expense. Otherwise, I feel like I'm approving something I know nothing about. And that doesn't seem like responsible oversight to me.
Any other council members? Okay, any public comment? Anyone would like to make a comment or question? Feel free to raise your hand.
I do not see any hands raised, Mayor, on this item.
Okay, so I'll bring this item on the consent calendar back to the council.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, motion by Mayor Pro Tem Plummer, second by Councilmember Garaventa. Mary Rose, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Hawkins?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer?
Aye.
Councilmember Garaventa?
Aye.
Councilmember Segerstrom?
Aye, but I would also like to see the overage accounted for each time. Thank you.
And Councilmember Such?
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0. Okay, moving on to unfinished business. Consideration to expand the number of social equity committee members. Mary Rose.
Yes, so this item was asked to be brought back at the last meeting on September 10th. The item that was brought back, or the item that was brought forward for the council's consideration on September 10th was voting as a whole of 5 members of the public. Each member of the public was a representative of each council member. The council did ask to bring back an item for the possible expansion of the total number of committee members that are members of the public. And so this item is asking whether or not the council would like to consider the expansion of the Social Equity Committee members. There are options for you to consider on the agenda report. Number one is the expansion of the current numbers of Social Equity Committee members by choosing additional members from the remaining 7 applicants that that turned in and met the deadline on August 21st, 2020, or open the application process again and determine a deadline of when those applications can be received. Or the other option is to not expand the current members and keep it to the 5 members of the public, plus the 2 additional council member representatives, which are Councilmember Such and Councilmember Garaventa. I will note that these meetings will be open meetings to the public. So although that there are 7 members, voting members on the committee, the members of the public can still participate as an open meeting. And with that, I will turn it over to the council.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Councilmember Such.
Well, since I'm the one that brought this, I thought I should say that I actually, at this point, would like to not expand the council members. I mean, the public members to 7, because I had no idea it was going to delay the beginning of this committee so long. I think it's not worth it. So I would vote the number 2, do not expand the current numbers of Social Equity Committee members. And sorry if I've wasted everyone's time.
Oh, this is what we're supposed to do. That's transparency. So I don't feel that you've wasted any time.
Well, it feels like I've wasted a little bit of time.
Anyone else?
No, we'd like to hear public comments. So.
Okay. Ann, did you want to say anything before I turned it over to public comment?
No, Colette and I think are of a single mind that it's best to leave the committee as is and move forward. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I just want to make a comment before we turn it over to public comment that I did have a African-American gentleman get a hold of me, and he was a little upset that he could not be on the committee. You know, he didn't realize that, that there was the open application process had already ended and he was interested in joining. So I just want to throw that out there. He's, I believe, lived in the county 19 years is what he had told me. So he was a little upset about it. He may be on this Zoom meeting. I'm not for sure. And he may want to speak. He may not. So with that, I will turn it over to public comment.
If there's any member of the public wishing to provide public comment on this item, you can do so by pressing the raise hand button under the participant tab or *9 on your phone. And at this time, Mayor, I do not see any hands raised for public comment on this item.
Okay, well, going once, twice. Okay, so we will, yep. So we'll bring it back to the council, and I've already said my.
I'm sorry, I hate to apologize. We had someone raise their hand right at the last second. So if you give me a second to unmute Mr. Duez, I think is how you pronounce the last name.
Okay.
Okay.
And look, and Darren, just before you do speak, I just want to let everyone know you are one of the members on the Social Equity Committee.
Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. I think it's a great idea to have an African-American point of view, especially someone who's been here 19 years, I believe. I think that would be something that would be, maybe if you're not going to accept 2 new members, maybe 1, I understand the span of control, but I think passing on this situation where we can get a good idea of what he's been through being here is a great idea. I think that that's something that shouldn't be overlooked. I think that, I don't know the behind the story of any of this or why we're not adding or subtracting members or anything, but I think that that would be a great idea to get a perspective from someone who's been here a long time.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Okay, and I believe Councilmember Such has a question for you.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay, I'm
Well,
sorry.
We could reassure the public that Councilmember Such already has a choice who is African American, a lovely lady, and I believe she's been in the county over 30, almost 40 years. Yeah, it was 19 in Sonora itself, and then some 10 years in Jamestown. So it's not that the African American perspective will be completely ignored.
Or even ignored at all.
Or ignored at all. Well, it just,
No.
when people just see names.
Right.
I want to see if there's any more.
Yeah, is there any more public comment? Thank you, Darren.
If there is any member of the public wishing to provide public comment on this item, please raise your hand at this time. And I don't see any hands raised, Mayor.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the council. Like I said, I've already said what I, said my part. So it basically is left up to the pleasure of the council, how we'd like to proceed.
Well, did you want to say anything?
No, I'm waiting. I thought I might second a motion, but that the principal party is here.
I mean, I guess the way I look at it, and I'll say this part, if we're going to open it up, I think we should open it up, not just to who it applied, but we open it up again. To me, that's what I think democracy would do in this case. Otherwise, I have to agree with Colette in leaving it alone. But if we do open it back up, I think it needs to be opened up to new applicants.
Well, that would be my thoughts as well. If we do open it back up, I would think we would open it back up to more people. But frankly, I think we need to move on. And we've already advertised for it, and people mostly knew the parameters of, it was publicized, so we knew the parameters of the committee and what was going on. So I think there certainly will be ample opportunity for anybody in the community to express their what they need to at these meetings. So I think the longer we wait, the longer it just drones on and on. So I think we need to go and have a solution. So I would say we just not have a motion and just go on like it is.
Okay, I mean, if that's the Mark, did you have anything to add to that?
No, nothing that would.
What did you say?
Do you need a motion?
I don't think, I was actually asked Mayor Rose if we are leaving it as it was.
It's already been approved by a committee of 7, so it doesn't need an additional motion to maintain the same number.
Great.
Okay, so with that.
Does everyone agree with that?
I agree with it. I think that we have a delightful committee, very nicely balanced with very capable people.
I think there's a consensus.
Like I said, I could honestly go either way. So,
yeah.
But I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. So, okay, so on to new business. Consideration to approve the 2021 Volunteer Fire Assistance VFA Grant Program Agreement number 7FG20023 in the amount of $5,960 and adopt Resolution 9-21-20-A authorizing the city administrator to execute the agreement and any subsequent documents. Mary Rose.
I'm just going to get a brief introduction of this item, and then I'll let Chief News speak in regards to it. This is our yearly VFA grant that we receive from the Department of Forestry. And if Amy is on the line, she can give a synopsis of what we'll be receiving in this grant and any history that the council members might need. Chief New, are you on the line?
Amy New, are you there?
I'm not detecting an audio. I believe she's on, but I'm not detecting audio on her account.
She is on, I see her.
She's connecting right now.
Well, if she is not going to get on, this grant comes before the council every year. We apply for it in March. If this is something kind of a yearly review that we do, it is a 50-50 match, meaning the monies that we receive from this grant will have to be matched so that the total amount spent in this grant program is that 11,000 number. But as the resolution and what we are certifying is the amount that we would receive, which is the $5,960.
Okay, so Amy's not.
Could she be calling in on a different line? Let me check. There is a hand raised. I'm going to double check if that's Chief New.
Hey, how about now?
There you go.
Yay!
All right, thank you. Sorry, yeah, I called in because I don't have the audio on the computer, so I have to call in and use different screens. So, yeah, as Mary Rose said, this is actually a CAL FIRE a grant that is in the state of California, and we have been successful almost every single year in getting this grant. The grant does award up to a $40,000 grant with a $20,000 match. This year, because of financial constraints and stuff, we did scale back what we were asking for, just because knowing with the projected finances of the budget, we were not going to be able to put in for that full amount. So this helps us with our offset our operating budget and get the needed supplies and equipment that we use throughout the year that need replacement, such as structural and wildland personal protective equipment, tools, and stuff like that. So this year we were excited to actually get almost everything that we asked for in the grant, and with the matching funds of the $5,960 will come out of our reimbursement on our Code 5 account, which is the deployments that we go out on the California Fire Assistance Agreement. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys might have at this time.
I don't have any questions. Does anyone else?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so we will turn it over to public comment.
If there's any member of the public wishing to provide a public comment on this item, you can do so by pressing the raise hand button under the participant tab or pressing *9 on your phone. And at this time, Mayor, I do not see any hands raised for this item.
Okay, so we will bring it back to the council.
So I'll go ahead and move to approve the VFA grant program agreement. Second.
Motion by.
Oh, sorry, and adopt resolution 09-2120-A.
Ah.
I second the complete motion.
Motion by Garaventa and second by Mayor Pro Tem Plummer. And I just want to say thank you, Amy, as always.
Yep.
You
terrific work.
You're definitely a shining star of the county, and we appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
No, it's the whole county.
Yep.
Yeah, I meant to say that.
Yep.
It's the whole county. So, and really and truly, I'll say this before I ask for a vote, is that, I get more compliments about our fire department from people who do not live in the city. And whether it's been on a car wreck that happened a mile outside the city limits, or on assistance with another fire that's 100 miles away type of thing. I mean, we get a lot of compliments.
Yeah.
And I know it's not just the chief, but it's everyone in our fire department. So you really are a shining star of the county, and we thank you. So
thank you.
With that being said, roll call vote, Mary Rose.
Mayor Hawkins?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer?
Aye.
Councilmember Garaventa?
Aye.
Councilmember Sagerstrom?
Aye.
And Councilmember Such?
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0. On new business, item number 8, we took that off. So now we go to item number 9, which is City Council information and possible direction regarding a recreational cannabis ordinance. Mary Rose.
And Nubia, if you would you please make me host so I can share my screen? Just a second, and I will try to get us going on. So at the last, well, excuse me, not the last meeting. Oh my gosh, time's gone by really fast. On July 22nd, the council directed staff to draft an ordinance amending our municipal code to allow for the establishment, operation, and permitting of recreational cannabis businesses within the city of Sonora jurisdiction. And what myself and Nubia Goldstein, our deputy city attorney, is bringing forth in front of the council is what a draft ordinance is looking like. Trying to hear back from any possible direction from council before it goes before our planning commission, which is scheduled to go forth on October 13th. So what was presented in the agenda report was what we call a legislative or a red line version of the 2 ordinances that we would be amending if the council so chooses to allow for recreational cannabis to go forth within the city. The 2 ordinances, or excuse me, the 2 titles that would be amended within the municipal code is 8.36 and Title 17. Let me get to it. I believe it's 17.40. I'll get to it here for a second. But just a real, because we do have some council members here on with us that are new, Councilmember Sagerstrom, just to kind of give a brief history of what the city council has been doing in regards to cannabis, whether it be medicinal or recreational. I thought I'd give a brief history of Prop 64 and what is allowable under the Prop 64 law within the city of Sonora, and then just to kind of go over what we allow currently, and then to look at the draft ordinances. So Prop 64, as you're aware, was passed in November of 2016, and that allowed for the regulating of non-medicinal cannabis within the state of California. And it also allowed for the creation of a state regulatory and licensing system for commercial cultivation, testing, and distribution of non-medicinal cannabis and manufacturing of non-medicinal cannabis. And it also allows local governments to prohibit or regulate and license all non-medicinal cannabis. So when we look at what the focus of the Adult Use of Marijuana Act was, you're looking at obviously the regulating of recreational cannabis. And from a taxation or a revenue standpoint, it really gave a distinction of who was exempted from state and local sales tax versus who would be imposed those state and local sales tax. From a taxation standpoint, right now through the city of Sonora, we only allow for the medicinal cannabis to be sold within a dispensary or type M business. And so because of that, that exempted any type of sales tax collection, both on behalf of the state and the city as well. And then also it allowed governments to regulate, to prohibit commercial cannabis within our jurisdictions, but we have to expressly say that with an ordinance, which we did in terms of outdoor cultivation. So moving on to what is currently allowable in the city of Sonora. On January 18, 2018, the city of Sonora approved an ordinance to allow for the establishment to regulate cannabis businesses within the city. At the time, the ordinance allowed for, like I stated, medicinal cannabis businesses. And since that time, we have entered into 2 development agreements with 2 dispensary or retail medicinal businesses, one of which is currently fully operational and operating within the city guidelines of being operational. The other business has yet to become operational, and we are working with that business at this time to ensure that they open as to what their development agreement was agreed to. So back in July, the council asked us to look at what would a recreational cannabis ordinance look like. And in your packet, along with the legislative and red line versions, I'm just going to walk you through what our current ordinances state for the different types of businesses and what the new ordinance would then allow for from a recreational standpoint. So the current, obviously, ordinance is a pilot program. It's for medicinal only and allows for 2 business permits from a dispensary retail business type, and it prohibits businesses operating from 600 feet of a school, youth center, daycare, church, or park. And it's in your zones, CO, C, CG, and your industrial zone. So CO and C, obviously CG, those are your commercial zones. And we exempt our zone A, which is our downtown areas. So with the new ordinance in a draft form to the council, we're expanding beyond just the medicinal and allowing for the recreational adult use. The council had directed staff at the time back in July to allow for 3 businesses permits to be allowed, allowing for those 2 businesses permits that are operating currently, and allowing for an additional permit to be explored or bid on through an RFP process to allow for that second business that hasn't been fully operational yet to come into compliance and to operate. It still has the same prohibitions as far as operating from the 600 feet of school, youth care, daycare center, churches, and parks, and it still has the same zoning requirements from a cannabis business dispensary retail. So it's still within your commercial, it's still within your industrial zones, but it is not within that zone A, the downtown area. So from a cannabis manufacturing part, we did again have a pilot program, and it was for medicinal and adult use businesses allowed for volatile and non-volatile businesses, and it was only in your light industrial zone. We have never entered into any development agreements for these types of businesses within the city of Sonora. Your new ordinance allows for the expansion, obviously, of the recreation. It still allows for the volatile and non-volatile businesses, but it expands upon the zones in which those manufacturing businesses can operate. So currently, under the current ordinance, it allows for operation only within the light industrial zones, which we have a very selective part of where those zones actually are. In the current new, or excuse me, in the new ordinance, it would expand to your C zones, so just your commercial C zones, and obviously exempt zone A. So your C zones are your commercial zones, but it's not your full commercial, which is Lowe's and Walmart and all of that. It's not that commercial. It's your other commercial zones that are within the Monterey jurisdiction. And Rochelle, correct me if I'm wrong for the C zone. We should have had a map on here. But those are your C zones. And again, exempting zone A, so no manufacturing. It also would allow, we do have some commercial properties within the Stockton Road area. It would allow for those properties to then qualify for manufacturing within the Stockton Road corridor. Same with cannabis testing laboratory. Again, it expands the zone in which businesses could qualify, to petition for the conditional use permit. So it goes not just in your light industrial zone, but again, going into your C zone, your commercial zone. And then again, we have not entered into any type of development agreement with this type of business type. We've only entered into development agreements with retail at this point. But it did make some changes. The new ordinance did make some changes to the manufacturing and testing. Cultivation, we have not changed anything as far as cultivation is concerned. The law does not allow us to limit anything beyond the 6 plants per residence for personal use with indoor, and the city is still within the new ordinance prohibiting outdoor cultivation. So again, the drafts amend titles 8.36 of your municipal code and also 17.60.040 of your municipal code. And then just a brief timeline on what we're looking at from an ordinance implementation. Today, as I stated, we're looking at just presenting the draft to City Council to have any input. October 13th, we're asking for this to go before the Planning Commission because we would be, looking at land use and rezoning in Title 17. So the Planning Commission would give a recommendation to the City Council based on what is presented on the October 13th date. And then based on that recommendation, we would hold public hearings beginning on November 2nd for your first reading, and then November 16th for your second reading and possible adoption, which means estimating December would be when your ordinance would take full effect, waiting the 30 days after the adoption of the ordinance. So at this time, if you have any questions, we tried to make sure that we took exactly what the council had kind of directed from that July 20th date, expanding upon those three businesses, and then also expanding for the zoning to allow for additional space for your manufacturing and testing, but still keeping the prohibition on the outdoor cultivation.
Mary Rose, one other thing is we are proposing to limit the number of manufacturing and testing to 3.
Yes, that's correct. I'm sorry. Yes, so we would limit manufacturing and testing permits to 3 businesses. So all business types would have 3 business types allowable within the city of Sonora.
And they would not necessarily be corresponding with another retail business, or that they could be separate entities for any or all of them?
They could, but they could also be joint. So you could have multiple licensees. So one owner could have a retail and a manufacturing, but they would be 2, separate permits, one for retail and one for manufacturing.
But a fourth competitor hypothetically could come in and say, I want to, try and get a manufacturing permit. We would be allowing that?
No, so even if it's one.
So only 3 entities can exist in the city.
Yes.
And then they can have additional permits if they want, as the ordinance is laid out right
Yes,
now.
because we would be giving separate permits, one for retail and one for manufacturing. And each of these would require conditional use permits before those development agreements are approved.
And one further question. It's been a little disappointing seeing, having let out a permit and not having seen any physical forward motion on that for something over a year now. And is it getting too down in the weeds for us to think about putting a time limit on the exercise thereof in the ordinance? Or is it already in your purview and capacity to say, okay, this has been so long, it's over and done with?
So we do have expirations of the permit. So Rochelle, I think we're talking about the second dispensary, the Brass House, I believe. Did we just renew his permit, I believe, in July?
No, his use permit has expired. His development agreement, however, they are good for a 3-year period. And Nubia can probably speak to that more. You guys are more intimately involved with the development agreement. Use permit has expired, so he'll be coming in for a new use permit. And depending on what the council approves or doesn't approve on these new ordinances, he could be expanding his use as well, because his original focus was also on manufacturing.
If there are to be any changes in terms of uses, then that is something that would have to come before the council as an amendment to the development agreement. And frankly, at that time, the council could put in any other conditions or restrictions, such as a timeline for operation. And it would be staff's recommendation to add language that would require the operator to basically open up shop within a certain time frame associated with it could be building permits, the conditional use permit, as a way to encourage the business to actually get going and not remain static.
So another, maybe it's a distinction without a difference, but if the permit has expired, they obviously can't do business, but they have a development agreement that is for 3 years. Does that preclude us from letting somebody else bid on it, or trying? Yeah, we're still in the 2 business model right now, but it could expand to 3, where they're not exercising it, but we have a contract. Should we, well, I'm just trying to figure out if we can let somebody else use that opportunity,
right?
Even though they have a development agreement.
And I apologize, Councilmember, or Mayor Pro Tem Plummer, I'm not equipped at the full
Yeah,
language
okay.
of development agreement
Yeah.
and what would allow us to get out of
Okay.
that. But we
Yeah.
need to be able to do something with that development
Okay.
agreement because we have entered into it for 3 years. So I would need to take a look at the development agreement to see what would be the options for the city. And Nubia, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but since we've entered into the development agreement, I'd have to look at the language of that.
Well, obviously they need some assurance of continuity if they're going to rebuild an entire business. I understand that. But I think we might want to consider something where after a certain amount of time, it is up to your discretion as the administrator or something, because there can be persuasive reasons where you say, okay, this couldn't happen in the regular timeline, we'll let it go. And I think that that's something that's really within your purview, that it doesn't need to come back to the council for review on that type of in the weeds detail, but that we need some way to align development agreements with permits and see forward motion, because we've seen nothing. And anyway, those are
okay.
That's the limit of my concerns.
So as to that point, Vice Mayor, what I would say is moving forward as part of this expansion of what was previously called the pilot program. And I think staff's goal is to now have something a little bit more concrete and more settled in terms of consistency, now having gone through the process to see what's worked and not worked. Moving forward with any applicants, it would be our recommendation to make modifications to the development agreements to make it clear that operators there has to be some movement within a certain time frame to prevent this exact situation from happening. And just
Well, of course we are, but we do that.
Okay, I think that's a great solution, because the cleaner we can keep the ordinance, of course, the nicer it is. But that would settle it very nicely.
And just as another note, I know we think about when we go into recreation, what does that look from a financial standpoint? So currently, right now, the city is not able to receive any sales tax on additional sales. Once that business is allowable to have transactions that are of recreational nature, then that's when those sales tax monies can start being recouped by the city and also at the statewide level. We've also been in contact with other jurisdictions, the city of Ceres in particular, and looking at other tiered systems from a public benefit fee. As of right now, we charge a 5% or up to 10 or 10,000 from revenue from the business. Some jurisdictions have multi-tiered public benefit fees where they collect based on the sales, the overall sales of that month for your business. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at, and those would be things, when we come back with the development agreement with businesses. But just from a financial perspective, we would start recognizing sales tax revenue, and then there is the possibility of looking at other mechanisms from a tier system on the collection of the public benefit fee. And then I also know, and I think Police Chief Taru is on the line. If he's still on the line, he has expressed some concerns in regards to overall safety and security with recreational businesses, and he would like to see some expansion on what that security actually is within a retail or manufacturing or testing facility, which would then be, detailed within a development agreement. And Police Chief, if you wanted to speak to the council in regards to that, he is muted at the moment. Nubia.
I don't have host capabilities. If you want to switch him over, I'll take care of it.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Taru.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, that you know, as Mario said, it pretty much covers it. But you know, as this is a pilot program, with any pilot program, it gives us the opportunity to evaluate the process and you know, make any needed improvements as we move forward. So there are some areas, especially as we expand into recreational side of the house, that we can tighten up on in security areas with this next development agreement. So these are based on lessons learned, and also not just locally, but you know, some partners in the Valley agencies that do have those type of recreational businesses going right now. So I'll be discussing those changes with the city administration as we move along.
Okay.
So at this point, we're looking at any possible direction that we have from the council on the draft ordinances. No action is needed if there is no direction given to staff. So just looking for any direction on the draft.
Are you looking for direction on changes, or whether we want to
proceed?
Consider it adoptable? Or?
Well, it's not for adoption. It's
Right.
just for what was just that the council is okay with going forth with the expansion for the recreational cannabis for 3 business permits allowable within the 3 different business type categories, still with the prohibition on any type of cultivation within the city of Sonora, and then the expansion of the zones as well. So we talked about specifically within manufacturing and testing, expanding in which those businesses can operate in which zones those are. So going from just light manufacturing to your commercial speed zone.
No, I think you can address the concerns that I had through the contracts and agreements with the different entities, and I find it already very well worked out. Pretty happy with it. Well, very happy with it.
Councilmember Such?
I'm just curious, perhaps Chief Vanderwill can talk about enhanced security, just what that would mean.
Yeah.
Because I was surprised not to see it included already, but I'm just curious what that looks like.
Yeah, so in general, just better defining what the security would look like. So, you know, previously we have pretty much gone off of what the Bureau of Cannabis Control has required, really having no baseline. So I think that was the appropriate approach to start off with. But just, you know, more, for example, you know, without getting into too many details, for example, maybe enhanced security lobby waiting area issues, secure storage areas, maybe additional safes, double locking product and cash after hours. You know, some adjustments are pretty minor, but could be helpful, such as, you know, measurement tapes at doors, you know, where the cameras are pointing at, requirements that people can't enter with hoodies and you know, face coverings and hats, something that would conceal their face and identity. Those type of things in general is what we'd be looking at.
And Councilmember Such, to that point as well, one of the reasons why there aren't the level of detailed security conditions that you could see in the ordinance is because that provides staff a little bit more flexibility at the CUP stage. So staff working with every department head, from fire to police, public works, whatever it entails, can tailor conditions of approval for a specific location based on any security concerns that are posed because of that particular area. So for example, depending on whether it's commercial or whatever zone it goes into, maybe just depending on where it's located, the chief could go in and determine that maybe there's an extra level of security needed or something additional, that he could request that to be tailored for that particular project that you may not need for another similar use somewhere else. And so because of that, you have a lot of flexibility at the CUP stage to really tailor it. And that's why it's not included in the ordinance. But, be assured that that is something that staff would work with every department head, including the chief, at the CUP stage before it goes to Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members?
Can one infer that the development agreement has to be signed off on by various chiefs of police and fire?
Yes, but also the conditional use permit has to be as well, so through that process as well.
I just didn't know the nuts and bolts detail. Good.
Anyone else? Ann, did you
Well,
have anything?
I was just curious when he was talking about what the chief Vanderweel was discussing. And I assume this is more in, well, I guess in any of the purchasing situations that an individual couldn't come in with a hoodie or face covering. So how does that work with COVID and face masks?
I could give you an example of what banks are doing right now is, they will require the person to, before they gain entry to the building, look at the camera, remove their mask and put it back up, and then they can continue on. So possibly something very similar to that.
Or the drive-up window. Thank you.
Okay, if the council doesn't have anything else, I'll turn it over to public comment. I knew we had one from earlier.
We did.
So
at this time, if there's any members of the public wishing to provide comment on this item, you can do so by pressing the raise hand button under the participant tab or pressing *9 on your phone. And we do have the operator of Hazy Bulldog on the line. I will.
Where is the?
So
just as a reminder to the rest of the members of the public, we are trying to keep everybody's account on mute until it's time for you to speak. So if you don't mind, I'll be making sure that I've muted all non-speaking participants. So I believe you're on, Hazy Bulldog. You're unmuted.
All right, thank you for letting me talk again. And you guys actually covered pretty much everything that I was going to ask beforehand. So I thought I'd just kind of double down on what Chief Vanderweel said there about security. I actually second that. I think that's going to be important as we grow in this industry, in this area. We definitely need to harden our security infrastructure. So I know that's an added cost to businesses coming in, but I plan on, especially if some of this goes through, buy a bigger building, and it's definitely going to be part of my main concerns is hardening the security. So I fully agree with that, and thank you guys for taking all this into consideration.
thank you.
Working hard.
Thank you. Did any council members have any questions?
Explain how to raise your hand.
Oh, Nubia, could you explain to everyone how to raise your hand? I believe there was an issue with that earlier.
Yes. Any members of the public wishing to get in line essentially for public comment, you can raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button under the participant tab on your toolbar on Zoom. If you are calling in by phone, you can get in line automatically by pressing *9 on your phone, and that will essentially raise your hand digitally, and as host, I can unmute you. So those are the two ways to provide public comment. And we do have another hand raised. I'm going to unmute Laura's iPhone. You're unmuted. Please proceed.
Oh, she's muted.
She just muted herself again, Nubia.
Unmute. Take this away.
Feedback. So
Good evening, City Council members and Mayor and City Administrator. My name is Sarah Heron, and I'm calling. I have a couple of questions for you. I think you've answered most of the questions, and it seems to be a really well thought out ordinance, as well as I like what the Chief of Police said also. But beyond that, my understanding is that you're going to have 3 licenses. 2 are going to be medical and 1 is going to be recreational. Is that correct?
No.
If I could, Mr.
No.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You have the ordinance in front, the ID of
do.
the ordinance in front of
Yeah,
you.
so you would essentially, we would allow for the creation of 3 new recreational licensures. So that it would allow for those businesses now for 3 businesses, for recreational cannabis.
And medical.
Medical and medical.
Let's see, yeah, we would still allow for the 3 medicinal, or excuse me, the 2 medicinal.
So the idea under the ordinance is to cap the total number of dispensaries to 3 in the city. So you wouldn't allow.
And those dispensaries could be medical and recreational,
Correct. Or one or the other, but you wouldn't have 5 or 6. You have 3, and it would be up to the operator to select if they wanted to sell both or just one. In today's climate, a lot of operators are realizing that it makes more sense to have flexibility because there's more restrictions associated with selling and processing medicinal cannabis than there is for recreational. So this just provides more flexibility. The ordinance is now going to be designed to provide more flexibility to the operator. The requirements will still be the same. They still have to go through the same process, whether it's recreational or medicinal. They are still going to be subject to the same requirements for safety and everything else. So but the idea is to allow 3 businesses total. Right now, the city only allows 2 medicinal. And at some point, and we did hear from one of the current operators, they may seek to make changes to their operation so that they could sell both.
So would it be a $7,500 application fee for both licenses or just one?
That isn't something that has been worked out yet at the staff level, and that's something that we'd have to figure out. And because there is changes to the program, some of the administrative components will need to be changed. So what we're seeking from the council tonight is some direction on overall goals and what the framework would look like, with the idea of tailoring that process moving forward once all of that's in place.
And am I allowed to come in and talk to the council members about my thought process on this or not?
Well, at this time, this is why we're taking public comment on this item. For any of the nuts and bolts of the city's processes for actually applying would be best directed to the city administrator.
Okay. All right. Okay. I appreciate that. Have a great day. Great evening.
Thank you. I just wanted to say something real quick, Sarah. I wanted to just recognize the fact that it's been about 8 or 9 years ago now that you and I and your sisters all sat down, and I really have never forgot it, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. I was hoping that you might remember me, but I wasn't sure. And I look forward to working with you guys this time.
I look forward to that too, and look forward to you getting to know the rest of the council. I think it'll be a huge benefit.
Good. I appreciate that. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, Mayor, I have Sarah also wishing to provide public comment. I'm not sure if that was also the last.
It was.
I don't need to speak. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I see one other Nubia, just says iPhone.
I'm trying to. I don't detect audio on the iPhone, so there may be some logistical issues, but I don't detect audio. Unless they're calling in on a different line, but I don't see any. So again, a reminder to the public, if you want to provide public comment on this item, go by pressing the raise hand button on your under the tab, or alternatively. Okay, I have Sarah's icon. You are unmuted.
Yes, hello.
Please proceed.
My name is Craig Hesse, and I'm enjoying everything you guys are talking about. The cultivation I had a question about. If someone were to get a micro business, would cultivation be allowed as one of the 3 businesses that the state allows underneath the micro business.
Mary Rose, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe the ordinance accounts for commercial cultivation.
Does not. It prohibits commercial cultivation of any kind, indoor or outdoor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I still have an iPhone with a raised hand, but I'm not detecting audio. So without detecting audio, they can't participate for public comment. So,
Can they chat?
unfortunately, the chat is disabled for the meeting, and they did lower their hand. So we'll make sure that that gets worked out in the future. If there's any further member of the public wishing to provide public comment on this item, please raise your hand under the raise hand button under the participant tab, or *9 on your phone. And I don't see any more hands raised for this item, Mayor.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the council. Who would like to speak first? Councilmember Such.
I would love to, and I know that I've had these maps before, but to have a map that showed me where these zones, just because otherwise I can't quite figure it out. And what else? I'm curious why, just the thought, I mean, I think this is really well thought out and I'm fine with all of it. I'm just curious why the zones were expanded. Just.
Yeah, and Rochelle, you can definitely chime in here because this was a discussion between Rochelle and I going kind of back and forth. You know, we've definitely heard from businesses, cannabis businesses in regards to potential business opportunities within the city of Sonora. And between, Rochelle identifying the different zones and where we had previously, or where the current ordinance maps out the manufacturing and testing, it really is a limited area in which those businesses could do any type of manufacturing or testing. When we looked at potential properties or potential locations for manufacturing within the C zone, there appeared that there could be business locations for those type of businesses within the C zone. And so from a staff standpoint, we felt that with ensuring that a conditional use permit would have to be approved in order for those types of businesses to be permitted, we as staff recommend the expansion of not only from the industrial zone, but to the C, strictly the C commercial zone.
Thanks.
The other issue that came up were things that we heard from businesses that would like to operate manufacturing, and there's some areas that they'd like to look at, and we looked at those areas, and they aren't areas that we could rezone to an ML. So we had to think about other ways that it might work. But the first thing that we did actually was reach out to other cities and see how they were impacted by manufacturing and testing. Very few have testing. Some of them are geared up for it. They're kind of getting ready for it. But on the manufacturing side, the cities that we talked to, they said they've had very little problems with the manufacturing. And I think that was the biggest concern, was the impact to the surrounding properties if you had expanded it out of the industrial. But it doesn't appear that there's a lot of issues that have come up.
It just sounds like it's really good thinking. So thank you.
And a use permit, as we talked about, sorry, Anna, a use permit, as we talked about, there's a lot of conditions that can be added to it. So it's not by right, it's by use permit, and that makes a big difference as well. I wouldn't support it if it was by right.
And Rochelle and I really looked at the different areas of the commercial zone and where would it make sense for those types of businesses. So we felt the C zone would allow for that.
Great, thanks.
Well, it's kind of pointless to permit new businesses if there's no place for them to establish.
Yeah, and it looks like Councilmember Strager-Strong has been raising her hand, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I wish I could see it, but Ann, go ahead, please.
I was just curious about the 600 feet that prohibited from operating within 600 feet of a school. Of course, I don't know where the C zones are, but I'm just 600 feet doesn't seem like an extensive distance from a school for a marijuana operation. So I'm probably, there's probably no school within an ML or a C zone. So I'm probably worrying about nothing.
So that is, there are schools within the commercial area and within the commercial zone. Daycare, there's other things. There's actually quite a few of the exclusions area. So there, but what happens is there is very limited, once the 600-foot comes into play, there's very little area really left in the city for them to develop. So it really is outside of an area of concern when you add in the 600-foot.
Okay,
and
thank you.
At the time they did it, they came up, the committee that worked on, they came up with the 600-foot. So there was a lot of thought and process that went into that. I think Jim was involved with that, but I'm not sure.
I was the alternate, Matt was on it, and Connie was on it. But I sat in a couple of meetings, so. Yeah. There's, it kind of, with it being not just schools, but the daycare, the churches, the parks, it really pushed it out to very peripheral areas of the city itself. And then you added the ML to it, and it's limited manufacturing. It became very small areas. So adding back the C, just the commercial zone adds a little better
flexibility
area without impacting a lot of people.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Creates a lot more opportunity, and the thing is, at some point, if we're going to allow it, we don't want somebody who would have $1 million manufacturing business simply unable to operate.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think really the key is with all of this is development agreement. So I think that's the big key, because it gets people that are willing to participate and do what is right. So instead of us having to come down and enforce the law, enforce what is right, they tend to be more willing. So I like this. I still wish there was, gosh, I've been up too long today. I still wish there was some cultivation.
You wish what?
I still wish there was cultivation in here, but that's my personal opinion. I remember saying that from the beginning. I understand why there is not, especially with outdoor cultivation. I understand that. So, but again, otherwise,
maybe a couple of years down the road after the three get it established, maybe that's a consideration at a later time.
And that's the thing, is that when we had originally discussed all this starting out, we knew it was going to be a long process. We didn't want to shoot from the hip, and I think we've actually done very well. We're a pretty good example of that. So again, I'm patient. I'm willing to be patient. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I think we lose a lot of people that end up going to other jurisdictions and getting so it's happening in the community anyway, but they're either traveling out of the area to get what they want, or they end up even though we ban deliveries, it's almost impossible to stop them, and they are going on in our community whether we try to stop them or not. So I'd rather see a local business benefit from that than, Arnold or Oakdale or Riverbank or Modesto or whatever, or farther.
Yeah, I was going to say Oakland.
Yeah.
So again, Mr. Mayor, this wasn't for any type of approval. It was just simply direction. And again, the timeline is October 13th to be brought forth before the Planning Commission with a recommendation for your public hearings beginning in November.
Okay, that's great. And I will say I've gotten a good deal of phone calls, and I think only one out of probably 40 have said don't do it. Otherwise, I've heard support, and it's, I believe it's because the city's doing it right. So I've gotten a lot of support from this. Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
So monthly reports, and I'll just read them off because they are line items. So receive the Community Development Monthly Report for August 2020. Receive the Fire Department's monthly report for August 2020. Receive the Sonora Police Department's monthly report for August 2020. Receive the Public Works monthly department report for August 2020. And then communications, receive an update on upcoming city holiday events due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, sir. So the city, of course, has been in constant contact with the county of Tuolumne in regards to COVID regulations, and especially as it relates to our annual city holiday events. Last week, we had a discussion with the Public Health Department in regards to our events that look ahead at our downtown Street, and then going forth into the holiday season with our Sonora Christmas parade. At this point, the way that the state has restrictions on events and gathering sizes, it does not look possible or probable that the city of Sonora can hold its downtown trick-or-treat street. There is obviously restrictions. There are no events to be allowed at any kind at this point. And in talking with Michelle Giacchetta, the Director of Public Health for the county, and asking what the gathering limit size is at the moment, she says there's no gatherings allowed at all at this point. And so with no events allowed, no gatherings allowed, we are letting the council know that we will not be going forward with the trick-or-treat street for downtown Sonora. And also in talking with some of our businesses, I know some of our businesses downtown have conveyed to us that they've been going through a lot as far as all of the PPE and getting all of that stuff prepared for their businesses. So, you know, I wouldn't want to put any additional things on those businesses in regards to getting prepared for trick-or-treat street at this point. So it is my recommendation that we don't go forward with trick-or-treat street at this point because it is so quick around the corner, and we don't see a possibility of the governor lightening up on those restrictions at this point. For the Christmas parade, that's kind of a different situation. This is a big event for not only the city and the county, but regionally. We know we get people from out of the county as well that come and watch and participate in our Sonora Christmas Day parade. Again, in talking and consulting with Michelle Giacchetta, again, having a parade is where people come downtown to the city of Sonora to watch and to gather, is not something the Public Health Department would be recommending that the city of Sonora go through with. However, I will say that staff has been busy trying to wrap their brains in how we could potentially do a parade, COVID style, if you will, to still allow for some sort of holiday and Christmas festivities or within the city of Sonora. So one of the options that we're looking at, we've looked at a couple of different options. One of the things that we are looking at is possibly doing a drive-by parade. And those were kind of popular in the beginning of COVID, where you had schools getting together and doing a drive-by parade through the residential neighborhoods. We're thinking maybe that's a possibility where we kind of map out a route and have a drive-by parade through the city of Sonora residential neighborhoods, and use this as an opportunity to show our appreciation of all of the essential workers and first responders that have really pulled through and have acted tremendously during this whole COVID crisis. So really giving recognition countywide to our first responders, our fire, our police, of course, our health, and also the police chief and I were talking, even obviously our teachers, our schools, but even our postal service workers and our UPS and so forth. So kind of having, it's because we can't have floats obviously going through residential neighborhoods with dancing teams dancing in the background or people riding on floats. We can't do that at this possibility as we're going to be on city streets that will not be shut down. But looking at different avenues to still be able to have somewhat of a parade, but just a different style of parade this year. So we just wanted to allow the council members to be informed that although we are recommending that we not go forward with trick-or-treat street, your staff is working and ensuring that we provide some sort of Christmas parade for our residents
albeit a different kind of parade. And of course, we were working with public health to ensure that we are following the guidelines in doing that.
Well, what do you members of the council like to speak first? I apologize. I got some strong feelings on it, so. So I know, Mary Rose, you and I had talked about this before. And again, we have to do what the state tells us to do. There's a lot of consequences that if we don't do what the state tells us to do, or in this case, the governor signs executive orders and goes from there. If we don't follow what the state tells us to do, there's a lot of consequences that could happen to our little city. And it could be monumental or bankrupting essentially for our little city. So we really want the public to understand that. In that, we're trying to find any gray areas that we can do this. This is important. Not only is this important to our businesses, but this is important to our morale for our city residents or county residents. You know, my kind of idea, it's not necessarily a proposal because it ultimately depends on what the council wants to do. But my idea is that possibly we take a look at looking at a full parade, maybe 2 weeks after, 3 weeks after the date we normally have it, which is the day after Thanksgiving. Now, again, I don't think anything will be open, but at least that would get us to a point where we buy some time. And if it's not looking like, say, 3 weeks we could have before we would have this parade, then we could do something similar to what you're suggesting, Mary Rose. Because I mean, honestly, our back's against the wall on this, and our back's against the wall on this. We have real options other than just completely shut it down and literally wallow that we can't have a parade, or do something that's an alternative.
So the only thing I would say to that is it takes a lot of preparation for parades. And we have to get permission from Caltrans as well to be shutting down Washington Street. So in the interest, because we would have to be starting to ask Caltrans and getting those permits here in early October. In the interest of time, to be able to adequately prepare, I think that's why we were trying to bring it now to let you know what staff is coming up with. I understand that's something that Michelle, Ted and I were talking about. Hey, do we just push it back a couple of weeks and hope for the best? But I don't think it would do our parade vendors any justice if we pushed it back and then canceled, because it does take a lot of preparation and planning for this type of event.
It absolutely does. And again, I'm not trying to debate anything. I just, trying to look at all options, and maybe that could be an option. But again, I understand it's a lot to do. So my question would be from this is, say we do ask Caltrans to say, and I have no idea the dates. Say we ask Caltrans, hey, could we shut down, 49 for, say December 18th? I don't know what day that falls on. I'm not worried about that. Is it possible we come back at December 1st and say, hey, never mind, we don't need to do that because the state's telling us we can't? Is that even a remote possibility?
Mary Rose, would you like me to jump in? Because I did talk to Caltrans.
Sure, go ahead, Rochelle.
So we did reach out to Caltrans, and we actually got written comments back from them. And they said that the city is welcome to put in for an encroachment permit. It's about a 6-week process for the approval, and that's why, we're bringing it to you tonight as well. They said they won't act on any encroachment permit at all until the governor releases the restrictions. So even if the city were to apply, they would not comment or react or provide anything to the city until those restrictions were rescinded. If the governor rescinded them, then they would process the application. But that's what we were told.
That's basically what I was looking for, Rochelle. Thank you. Because it's, again, I'm starting to get more than a few texts about saving our Christmas parade. And I mean, the public needs to understand, this is our city. Our hands are still tied an awful lot. So that, again, I want this public to understand this is kind of where we're at. And I can see Mr. Plummer has a question.
Not so much a question, but that is a perfect segue into an alternative after COVID parade. When all of the restrictions are lifted, we could have a thankful parade.
I think the public would love that.
maybe it takes more consideration than my 20 seconds of thought, but I think that a parade, if we can't have our regular parade, that we might want to consider it and test the waters with our constituents and give it some thought, because it will be wonderful when we quit. Heck, just being able to rip these masks off will be nice.
Yes. Councilmember Such.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for a really creative idea. I think it's really creative, and I think it's fun, and I think it will resonate with people. So thank you.
And of course, we'll have Santa Claus at the end of it as well for the kids, right? So that they can still see it.
Yeah.
But you know, and
With some candy to throw to the kids who can't trick or treat.
yeah, and so this was obviously a discussion with all of staff and really trying to come together. And we understand, you know, that the community, obviously this is such a big event, but not only that, but the community needs something uplifting. And so at this point, and we would definitely want to show appreciation to how much our community has gone above and beyond at this point to respond to this pandemic. So that was kind of our plan, and we wanted to kind of pitch it to the council to see if you were okay with us proceeding with that.
We are still planning on having Santa in Courthouse Park, though. We'll figure out social distancing and everything, but we definitely want to have him there so that the kids can come and see Santa.
Well, thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Mary Rose. But I just want the public to understand, like, our back really is against the wall in this, and we want to do so much more. We just legally cannot. So, Jim, did you have anything?
No, I think it's a great idea. And as for moving it, you know, I think it's because it's on Black Friday and I think you'll get a lot of people that come to visit their families at Thanksgiving time that wouldn't be here on, say, December 10th or 14th.
Something I didn't think about. That's a good idea.
So I think we just ought to go ahead and do it on that day and do it as a winding through the streets of Sonora. So
yeah, no, I didn't even think about that. That makes a lot of sense. So.
Well, also, just to do a parade, if you have floats and stuff, those take weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
To put together, so it doesn't allow that kind of spontaneity, I don't think.
Well, it also, I think, engages the entire community because it's just not on one street. So that's nice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to council member and department head reports. Finance Director Chris Gorski.
I have nothing tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Community Development Director Rochelle Kellogg.
I have nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney Nubia Goldstein.
Nothing, again, nothing further, but to say it's nice to see you all after such a long time, even if it's only via Zoom.
Fire Chief New.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yay, I finally got it figured out. Just wanted to let everyone know that the fire department was successful in receiving a $10,000 grant from the California Fire Foundation. And that is for purchasing a new fit tester. Every year we have to certify our employees by being fit tested for the self-contained breathing apparatus and the masks that we wear for going inside the structures for firefighting. And the one we currently have was purchased by the Fire Chiefs Association back in the early 1980s. And has definitely reached its lifespan and is no longer working. So I really wanted to say thank you to the California Fire Foundation grant program for issuing us an award for $10,000 to purchase a new fit tester. So that's all I have to report.
wonderful. Can we put that old piece of equipment in the museum then?
It definitely would belong in the museum. The instructional tape is on VHS. So yes, I think that would be
Surprised it's not Betamax.
I'm surprised it isn't either.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Police Chief Vanderweel, is he still on?
I'm still on. Nothing else tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mary Rose, anything from our...
Nothing else to add tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sagestrom.
Okay, I got a little list of things here. The Yes Partnership meeting committee met last week. There were some interesting things. One outcome was that the prediction for more public service power outages is 2 to 4 more between now and November. So everybody, Jim, maybe you'll have more generator sales coming up. And they also, the 4S, the 4H, Jolynn Miller was saying that October is STEM month. That's science, technology, and engineering and mathematics. So if you have any kids that are into the space program, the Mars rover program, they have a $15 kit that you can work on that's all about space. The Energy Action Committee is going to be meeting on Wednesday. And I'm happy to report that the city is going to undergo an energy audit, which might be a precursor to getting new energy equipment, and that Chris Gorski is going to join that committee. And I took a roundtable on communications with the League of Cities, and it really pointed to our need for a city clerk. I'm looking forward to the November election, hoping that we'll be allowed to appoint a city clerk, because I think there's a huge vacuum in what our city can be doing with an additional employee as valuable as the city clerk. And then finally, I just wanted to comment and condemn the kind of political vandalism that's going on around the community, people stealing signs out of homeowners' property. It's both trespassing and vandalism, and it's also, downright cowardly and un-American. So I would suggest to anyone who is engaging in such an activity that maybe they should just go and vote and make sure that the way that they think things should go goes that way. So thank you.
Thank you. Because, wow, yeah, I agree completely, but thank you. Councilmember Garaventa.
2 meetings. One I had to miss because of because I had to work, as it turned out. And it was the Visitors Bureau meeting. And the other meeting I attended was the Transportation Council meeting last Wednesday. And the main thing out of that is that we passed the, other than seeing the presentation we saw tonight, we passed the active transportation plan, which is the plan for basically bicycles and e-bikes and pedestrians and I can't say non-motorized modes of transportation because the e-bike is a motor, but non-car truck traffic. Hopefully we'll get some good results from our grants that we're trying to get, especially for the Dragoon Gulch Extension Trail, which was also submitted. So that's my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Such.
I also attended TCTC, and I'm just very excited about the active transportation plan. I think the fact that we don't have many bicyclists currently is not because people wouldn't ride a bicycle, it's that it's not safe. And I think that really brings, and I think that, young people who are looking to a community to move to look for things like this. I just think it's right in every way. And I think someone should open an electric bike shop downtown because it's the thing of the future. I also attended IRWIM, the water group, and there's a lot of talk in these meetings about rainwater reclamation, stormwater control, and they really want to help the city of Sonora do the work that needs to be done with grants and to prevent the kinds of flooding that we've had here periodically.
At an institutional level or a private?
Well, it's just their
owner?
grant, there are whole plans that communities create, and then they write the grant for it. So it could be kind of a cool project, I think. And I'll work with you about that. I promise I won't sign up for anything. Oh, actually, I couldn't. So anyhow, it's an interesting group, and they're doing really interesting work. Currently, the project is in Twayhart, and it's moving all the water from the upper shopping center bringing it down to the golf course. I mean, it's great work that they're doing. So that's it.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Nothing further this evening. Thank you.
Well, then just want to say a few things. The other morning I woke up and had saw the news like everyone else, and saw that a kid, 17-year-old kid, had been shot and killed in our little itty bitty city. And I'm a father of a 17-year-old, and it really got me. And please, Chief, if you're still listening, I know this council really supports you and the department and appreciates you. And I can't imagine the spot that you're in, but we all thank you very much for you and your officers' hard work during this time. And I know that it's been emotional, and we thank you so much. So with that is all I have to say. So meeting is adjourned.
Night all.
Night, Ann.
Night.